This video was brought to you by a better route planner, Kempower, Markus Bil, Stormberg and Bilkomponenter. Alright, we're back home now. So if you compare the EV6 versus i4, you see that they are pretty much neck on neck. The i4 got a little better launch, but you know, by the way, I don't know if you heard it, but the sound was from the i4. The tires were struggling a bit because we actually had continental Central European winter tires, so that's a little bit unfair on the i4, and was a little bit colder. As you see here, 4 degrees Celsius versus 16 degrees. But despite that, the i4 got a better launch because it had launch control. The EV6 doesn't have launch control. You just stomp on the accelerator and that's it. So it actually went faster than the EV6 in the beginning, despite that the EV6 had more power. Until 100 kilometers per hour, suddenly the i4 was lagging behind. Actually, at one point, a lot, 0.3 seconds. But then something weird happened at 200 kilometers per hour. Then the i4 was ahead again, and you see the i4 even had this slight disadvantage of slightly more slope. You can see it here. So yeah, I mean, which one was faster? Well, the EV6 had higher peak power, but the i4 had a flatter power curve. So let me see, I can show you the next one here maybe. If we repeat this one, you see that if I go a little bit slower, or let me see, can I do this? Okay, let me see if I can skip. You see, if we look here, in the beginning, yeah, at lower speed, you get that 460 kilowatt peak, which is, well, it's actually slightly more than 585 horsepower, but maybe after some losses in the wheels, you get 585. But you can keep that only for about 2 seconds before it starts dropping. And then the i4 has 544 horsepower, which is actually 400 kilowatt. So you can say that, yeah, at let me see, at this point roughly, after around 160 kilometers per hour, then the power is about the same. And then from that point, the i4 had an edge. That's probably why the i4 barely beat the EV6 to 200 kilometers per hour. But you see, like I mentioned, if the conditions were better for the i4, if the conditions were more fair when it comes to tires and maybe also outside temperature, then I'm pretty sure that the i4 would go to 200 before EV6. Yeah, and then also when you look at the other one here, next comparison, let me skip it. Yeah, this one. One thing that you need to note is that I also mentioned this when I tested the EV6, the previous video, is that when the speedometer is more off on the EV6 versus the Tesla. So for example, if I can, when this one shows 201 kilometers per hour, the GPS speed is roughly 196, whereas this one is usually 188. At these speeds is 1 or 2 kilometers per hour. So we talk about 188 versus 196. So it's not, it's not 11 kilometers per hour difference. Just bear that in mind. But as you can see, it was quite clear that the EV6, despite being a bigger car even, beat the Model 3, but this is the 2019 Model 3 before heat pump. This is actually MC Hammer you see here. So unfortunately I don't have a newer result of the newest, greatest Model 3 performance. I should at least try 2022, 23. I'm not sure if they updated the motor, because this is one of the first version of Model 3 performance. But then I know after that one, Tesla, they came out with a new variant for Model Y, and I wonder if they also updated that for Model 3, and then that's why I'm not sure how much faster the latest and greatest Model 3 is. But on the other hand, the EV6 is not as small as the Model 3, so the EV6 sits right between the Model 3 and the Model Y, and I'm pretty sure, without testing it, but my impression is that the Model Y, even the latest 2022 Model Y, can't beat EV6. The EV6 is blistering fast for its class, for its price. And then if we look at the last one, I did the last one here, just the M50, but you can also see here when we skip a little bit that yeah, here, so you see when we were accelerating, the power was nice and flat. And also when I tested earlier, when I look at the power meter and torque meter, there was another screen on the M50. I saw that it was flat, but I didn't go all the way to 200 on that screen. But at least when I did the hammer test in Germany, yeah, I saw that it had nice and flat power curve. And also one worth mentioning that the EV6 has 740 Newton meter torque, whereas the i4 has 795 Newton meter torque. And what does that torque number mean? Well, it means that at lower speed, lower RPM, you know that horsepower equals to RPM multiplied by torque. So with more torque in the M50, you can then have a flatter curve. That's probably what I'm guessing it's doing, is that at lower speed it will pump the torque up, and that's why you get a flatter curve, whereas the EV6 GT is then somewhat dictated by the RPM and the maximum torque there. And that's why maybe I'm not sure if the battery, but it's just a different curve. I haven't prepared the data, but you know what it looks like. Well, the EV6 has like a peak. We can skip here, like we saw here, right? It has the peak quite high in the beginning, zoop, but then it drops after a bit. But then the i4 is more like a flat curve. Germans, they like flat curves, yeah. It just has a flat 400 kilowatt rather than 450 initially, and then below 400 after a while. Yeah, so that's the big difference between those two. And then I'm going to show you the last one, just okay, as comparison. But this is so this one Plaid is of course almost twice as expensive, but just you can't really compare Plaid versus EV6 or the other ones, because it's first of all, it's a lot more expensive, but the power output here is just insane compared to it has flat 800 kilowatt or 1000 horsepower, at least before losses, but it has 1000 horsepower flat all the way to 260. Yeah, okay, if at least, let me show you here. So let's say at least past 200 at one point. Yeah, 200 here roughly, right? Okay, let me stop roughly here. You see, at 250 kilometers per hour, it has 700 kilowatts, sorry, some 700 kilowatt, and that is actually twice as much as the EV6. Okay, if we compare EV6 at around 250 kilometers per hour, you see that we have half the power as the Plaid. So yeah, in that regard, yes, when we talk about losses and all that, they are not comparable, because if the Plaid outputted only half the power, it will of course have lower losses. So that's why I prefer comparing the EV6 versus Model 3 or Model Y or the i4 instead. But okay, so now you guys saw the difference, huh? EV6. My impression is that it goes like a rocket. Yeah. And also my impression of the battery is that the battery has really low internal resistance and it doesn't heat up that much. But what I found out, at least based on my high-speed run, is that the thermal management, the cooling, doesn't seem to be that great when it comes to just normal 1,000 kilometer challenge. The way the battery heats up and then eventually overheats, even though we don't even turn on the car. And also during the high-speed run, it doesn't cool down as much as I would wish it to do. And also, as a coincidence, Sandy Munro also found out this, but he doesn't go on the Autobahn to test it. He reverse engineered the car and, you know, open up under the hood, and he also found the same thing. So it points toward the same thing. But it seems like the EV6 can get away with it because the battery doesn't heat up that much as Tesla battery. So yeah, but then when it comes to the i4, first I was like, you know, this is EV6 is awesome, but also I found that the i4 also performs pretty well. And even when the i4 was in the throttle state, when I lost boost, I still had, I think it was 470 horsepower instead of 544, whereas the EV6, once it overheated the battery, I had less power than the i4. So if we would have some kind of battle, right, high-speed battle between these two, after 10 minutes, when both batteries are overheated, the i4 should be better. But this is the way I have experienced this, so, you know, don't kill the messenger, yeah? And then we have to see, eventually, will I ever test Model 3 or Model Y performance on the Autobahn? Well, I'm actually sitting in the Model Y performance right now, but I don't know if I have time, and also based on the view count, it doesn't seem like it gets hundreds or thousands of views like it did before anymore. So that's why I'm probably gonna go to the Autobahn with the Model Y. But okay, I think that's gonna be it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching and talk to you later.